Can I just have attention, please, members, those who are non-voting members, because we're a little bit tight on seating tonight. Could non-voting members sit down the front here? Thank you. Good evening, members, officers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Development Committee tonight. And could I draw everyone's attention to page 3 within the agenda, which sets out the details regarding fire safety instructions and the webcasting arrangements. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the nearest exit and make your way to the assembly point located in the market car park adjacent to the Civic Suite building. Please do not return to the building unless given permission by council staff. For the benefit of those watching from home and those in the public gallery, members of the committee are seated in the front row, and also we have non-members of the committee here who are in front of me here. This is a bit of an unusual seating arrangement, but obviously we've had to move things around a little bit because there are so many of you here, which we're glad to see. Item 1, apologies for absence and substitute members. Apologies have been received from Councillor Constable, substitute member Councillor Marriott, Councillor Page, substituted with Councillor Lambourne, Councillor Stanley, substituted with member Councillor Cross, and Councillor not attending. Just Councillor Sharp is just not attending. Visiting members, we have Councillor Belton and Councillor Phil Shaw in the front row here. Okay, item 2, to receive declarations of interest. Members, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Essex County Councillor, Deputy for Highways and Infrastructure. I'm also a member of the RTPI, and we have a member here tonight that is also an Essex County Councillor, but that's all I know him through. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just remind members to get close to the microphone so as everything can be picked up? Thank you very much. Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Declare as a member of Essex County Council, and also the person here this evening is known to us as a member of Essex County Council.
Thank you. So we move on to item 3, which is application 25/00667/out, land east of Victory Lane, Rochford, Essex. Katie Rogers will present the report. Over to you, Katie.
This application is for outline planning permission for residential development of up to 300 dwellings. All matters are reserved except access to the site. This means that matters relating to detailed layout within the site, the appearance and scale of dwellings and landscaping are matters that would be considered in a later reserved matters application, which would follow if outline permission were granted. The site is approximately 10.7 hectares and approximately rectangular in shape. The site extends from Braes Lane along the southern boundary, and existing residential properties border the site's western boundary. There is sporadic development immediately north of the site and a cluster of low-density development beyond the southeastern corner. The site is largely undeveloped agricultural land. There are trees within and adjacent to the site, which are in the main found close to the site boundaries. This land use parameter plan shows the areas of the site where residential development is proposed in the beige colour and areas which would form strategic landscaping shown green. The development parcels would be served by a new vehicular access provided by a fourth arm to the existing roundabout on Braes Lane to the south. Officers are satisfied that this parameter plan would provide a suitable framework for future detailed layout plans to be developed. The precise scale of buildings within the site is not for consideration at this stage. However, this parameter plan would provide a framework for detailed design and includes indication of areas of the site where buildings would be up to 2-storey, that's the lighter yellow colour on the plan on screen, and areas where they would be up to 3-storey, that's the sort of orangey colour, more centrally positioned. In principle, it's considered that the scale of development proposed would be appropriate given the context of the site. These indicative site sections indicate in principle the scale of buildings proposed, which is not dissimilar to the existing housing opposite the site to the southern side of Braes Lane. This master plan is not for approval at its outline stage, but submitted to indicate how a more detailed scheme may be laid out. 4 attenuation basins are shown in the strategic landscaping areas of the site, and this is consistent with the draft surface water drainage strategy that has been submitted. The surface water from the development parcels would drain into these basins before outfalling to an existing ditch on the southern boundary at a controlled rate. The lead local flood authority are satisfied that the surface water would be appropriately dealt with at the site, and the site is at low risk of flooding from rivers and the sea. The attenuation basins will be designed to serve a dual purpose, also as open space for use by future residents. Indicative site sections indicate how the basins could be used and landscaped, including with planting, to achieve this dual purpose. So this is the illustrative master plan again, and this also shows that play space would be delivered within the open space at the site. And in addition to play space for younger children here, a financial contribution would be secured to deliver newer improvements to youth facilities in the locality. Ashington Parish Council have aspirations to deliver such improvements at nearby King George's playing field, which this contribution could help to deliver. This plan shows the proposed vehicular access to the site, which would be a fourth arm of the existing roundabout. A new pedestrian crossing of Braes Lane will be provided to the west of the existing roundabout. The Highway Authority have confirmed that these works in the highway could be delivered. The Highway Authority have also reviewed the transport assessment submitted with the application, which models the impact of traffic arising from the development on the local highway network. There is additional detail provided in the addendum to reassure members that the Highway Authority have considered the transport assessment in detail, and they are satisfied with its scope and the conclusions reached. The junctions that have been assessed are detailed in the addendum. The Highway Authority considers that this development would not have a residual cumulative impact on the highway, which would be severe. National planning policy requires a focus on the delivery of sustainable forms of travel.
Excuse me, point of order. Please, Chairman, could you ask the public behind us to keep it down?
If we could just be mindful that we do need to hear the officer report, please. I understand that emotions are high, but please do try and keep yourself in check. Would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. National planning policy requires a focus on the delivery of sustainable forms of travel, and it is considered that this site is in a sustainable location, within walking distance of a range of amenities and within walking distance of bus stops which connect to the centres of Rochford and Hockley, a relatively short journey away. A financial contribution would deliver enhancement to the existing bus service. One of the key considerations in the determination of this application is the acceptability of the proposal with regard to Greenbelt policy. The site is all designated as Greenbelt, where local planning policy looks to restrict development. However, national planning policy was amended last year to introduce a new category of development which is considered appropriate in the Greenbelt. Whether the site meets the new definition of grey belt is an important consideration. Officers have assessed the strength of contribution the site makes to the purposes of the Green Belt relating to the grey belt definition. The site adjoins a built-up area, but there is no town to the east of the site. The site does not, therefore, contribute strongly to the prevention of the merger of towns. The site is also enclosed by existing development forming part of the built-up area of Ashington on two sides, to the west and the south. The site is also partially enclosed by existing low-density development to the southeastern boundary. The site, because it is partially enclosed by existing development, would not result in an incongruous pattern of development in the Greenbelt. Given these characteristics of the site is not considered to strongly contribute to the purpose of Greenbelt relating to the prevention of unrestricted urban sprawl. Officers consider that the site therefore meets the definition of grey belt and the other requirements of national policy to amount to appropriate development in the Greenbelt. Whilst the local plan-making process is the best approach to ensuring strategic delivery of new development and the opportunity for the council to identify the land it considers the most appropriate for future housing development, the position the council finds itself in is that the council do not have a 5-year housing land supply, and this application for development has been submitted and must be determined. As set out in the committee report at paragraph 2.3, it would not be acceptable to refuse planning permission on the grounds of prematurity, as the new local plan is not at an advanced stage, and therefore very little weight can be attached to it in the decision-making on this application. Although the proposed development would conflict with the adopted development plan, national planning policy indicates that this proposal would be appropriate development within the Greenbelt, and as the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, national planning policy requires that the council apply the tilted balance. This means that there is a presumption in favour of granting planning permission, unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Significant weight needs to be attached to the fact that this development would deliver much needed housing in the district, including 50% affordable housing. There is no objection from statutory consultees, save for Southend Airport, which I will come on to in a second. The Highway Authority, Natural England, the Environment Agency, Anglian Water, the Lead Local Flood Authority and Essex County Council Education Authority are all satisfied that the proposed development is acceptable, subject to the necessary conditions or contributions being secured. London Southend Airport have raised a holding objection requiring that a flight procedure assessment is completed before they can confirm that the development would not impact adversely on safeguarding of the airport. This assessment has been commissioned, and it is recommended that the committee resolve to delegate authority to the Director of Place to issue a decision providing the outcome of the assessment is that the holding objection is withdrawn. Subject to this delegation, the recommendation, Chairman, is one of approval subject to the stated conditions and heads of terms for a legal agreement.
Thank you, Katie. We have two public speakers for this item. Mr MacArthur will speak in support of the application. Mr MacArthur, I don't know what there you are. If you come to the microphone and you have 5 minutes, I'll give you a 1-minute warning when you're near the end. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? evening, Chair and committee members and residents. My name is Jeremy MacArthur. I'm the Regional Plan Director for Bellway Homes, the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We have a strong track record of delivering high quality developments locally, including Elizabeth Gardens at Hall Road and land east of Spencer Gardens, located opposite this site. As highlighted in the presentation tonight, the proposed scheme will deliver sustainable, high-quality residential development that has been shaped by detailed discussions with both the council and officers and extensive engagement with local residents and stakeholders, who I thank for their input. The scheme will comprise of up to 300 homes, not over, including 50% affordable housing, with a third of the site for new public open space. The officer report covers in detail green and grey belt, so I will not repeat the planning policy position, but focus on why this is a good scheme to come forward, hence why the site has been identified within the Reg 18 consultation document as a clear preferred site option, further reinforcing the principle of development in this location. Members be aware of the Council's published housing land supply that stands at just 1.97 years as of this month. This engages the presumption in favour of sustainable development, where plan permission must be granted unless adverse impacts will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. To deliver a much needed market and affordable housing of a suitable mix that aligns with Rochford's identified need should be given substantial weight in the planning balance and would be making a meaningful contributions to addressing the current shortfall. We are all aware of the growing housing need in our area. Families, whom over 900 on the housing waiting list, are struggling to find affordable homes. Young and older people are being priced out. Residents have often to move away from the place they've called home for decades. We can change that tonight. You can imagine the delight after years of waiting for a house. The dream of your new home is finally made possible by this committee. As described in the committee report, the scheme delivers a comprehensive package of public benefits, including over £3.5 million worth of financial contributions for education, health and bus services. The site is within a sustainable location, adjacent to a Tier 1 settlement, near a range of services and facilities. We understand that local concerns on highways, and that is why we are committed to improving sustainable travel options, delivering Ashington Road cycle extension, along enhancements to existing bus services and provided a new pedestrian crossing. This will be delivered by us at Bellway, no risk to further costs to the taxpayer. The development will also bring the right economic benefits through the construction activity and job creation, apprenticeships for opportunities for local school and college leavers. The Highways Authority raised no objection to the scheme and confirmed that the submitted transport information demonstrates a thorough and robust assessment. An addendum to the committee report has been prepared with input from ECC Highways to provide further detail on the assessment methodology and how the conclusions have been reached. Overall, both the Council and Highways Authority agree that development would not result in serious highways impacts and safe and sustainable access can be achieved for all users. I would also emphasise that this outline application is for up to 300 homes. This is the maximum number, and it is likely that number will reduce as we work on the reserve matters stage with detailed design work. So the traffic modelling has therefore been undertaken under worst case scenario of 300 homes. Alongside statutory consultees, we have engaged closely with local stakeholders through our engagement with the Ashington Parish Council. We have gained a clear understanding of the local aspirations for King George Field and delight to provide £50,000 to support the improvement of youth facilities, delivering a lasting positive impact for the Ashington community. Overall, as set out in the Officers' Committee report, the principle of the development accords with relevant national and local policy, and those proposals bring significant economic, social and environmental benefits for the local area and wider region. We trust that members of the committee will agree with the conclusions made and resolve to grant plan permission this evening. This will open a door of opportunity for more local residents to have the ability to buy a home, but also provide an affordable home for those who are not fortunate to already own a home already. This scheme will result in more families staying locally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. MacArthur. If you'd like to get back to your seat, I just would like to correct you on one thing that you did actually say there. We had a housing policy review last year. We now have a need for 400 families, not 900 on the affordable housing. Okay, thank you. The second public speaker in objection to the application is Mr. Harrison. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. You have 5 minutes, and again, I will let you know when you have a minute left.
Can you hear me okay? Chair, members of the committee, I'm a resident living adjacent to the application site, and I'm speaking as a director of Trafalgar Green Residents Association, representing 72 households alongside the Stop Rochford Overdevelopment Group and the wider local community. I'm asking the committee to defer or refuse this application for the following reasons. First, Greenbelt misclassification. This proposal is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The officer report relies on the developer's claim that this is Greenbelt land. That conclusion is premature and unsafe. The council's own Greenbelt review is due by July. Any developer confident in their case would wait for that evidence. We ask you to do the same. Determining this application before that review undermines the plan-led system. Even without deferral, this site does not meet the definition of Grey Belt under paragraph 155 of the NPPF. It is wholly undeveloped, fertile agricultural land outside the settlement boundary, visually open on all sides except one. The Rochford Southend Joint Greenbelt Study identifies this land as making at least a moderate contribution to Greenbelt purposes. The report then reinterprets moderate as does not strongly contribute without defining where that threshold lies. That is subjective, not policy-based. Moderate contribution does not mean negligible harm, and moderate harm does not become acceptable simply because it is inconvenient. Second, countryside encroachment. Up to 300 dwellings here would permanently remove open countryside at the edge of Ashenden. This is textbook encroachment, directly undermining Greenbelt purpose. That harm is permanent and irreversible and is not outweighed by claimed benefits. Thirdly, this is not a genuinely sustainable location. The report relies on aspirational mitigation, future bus funding, travel plans and behavioural change that is not evidenced. Sustainability must exist in principle, not because money is paid later. Paragraphs 8, 110 and 115 of the NPPF require real outcomes, not assumptions. Fourth, landscape harm. The proposal would fundamentally suburbanise the rural setting of Ashenden. The report accepts landscape harm but never defines its severity and then attempts to defer that harm to reserve matters. Outline consent locks in the principle of development. Greenbelt harm cannot lawfully be approved on promises of future landscaping. Once consent is granted, this harm cannot be revisited. Fifth, the planning balance. Housing need is given exaggerated weight, treating any housing anywhere as sustainable. Affordable housing is presented as decisive, despite permanent Greenbelt loss and despite local experience. In Billericay, Bellway promised affordable housing, then later claimed it was unviable. This committee should treat those claims with caution. The officer concludes that there is no strong reason to refuse. That is not a test in the NPPF. The test is policy compliance and harm, particularly in Greenbelt. Sixth, traffic, and this is critical locally. This application relies on traffic data that has already been updated for the council's local plan, due by July. Just as with the Greenbelt review, deferral would allow an evidence-based decision. The TA treats Ashenden Road as a generic suburban corridor. It is not. Software uses parameters that are not representative of our area. Ashenden Road has severely limited route choice and exceptional concentration of 4 primary and 1 secondary schools, Rochford Station all within 2.4 miles, and Southend Airport. Time-critical, irregular traffic patterns and near constant disruption from roadworks. An FOI request showed 227 days of roadworks out of 400 between Lower Road and Southend Road on the Ashenden Road. That reality is not reflected in the modelling.
Minute left.
Paragraph 5.402 of the applicant's own assessment admits Ashenden Road is already over practical and theoretical capacity, meaning physical overload and permanent congestion, yet this is dismissed as not severe enough. Active Travel England has objected London Southend Airport pending a flight procedure assessment, which has yet not been provided, yet approval is still recommended. Safety. The report relies on a proposed zebra crossing. On 2 occasions, Essex County Council told King Edmund School that a crossing in this exact location would be highly problematic. If outline consent is granted and the crossing later proves unworkable, development can still proceed, leaving unresolved safety risk. Footways are inaccessible due to street furniture, particularly for wheelchair users and pushchairs. These are not acknowledged. Our senior safety response references an entirely different site, which raises serious concerns about evidence reliability. Finally, Section 106 reliance. At Hall Road and Bloor Homes, schools, buses and health facilities were promised and then quietly dropped or redirected elsewhere. The Integrated Care Board confirms services are oversubscribed, yet offers no assurance that funding will be used locally. Section 106 agreements are not mitigation if they are not delivered local to the developments where impacts occur. Members are not required to agree with the officer. You are entitled and required to reach your own judgment. I urge you to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. We have an order of speaking here. We'll start off with ward councillors, and ward councillors for this ward are Councillors Belton, Carter and Constable, and I believe Councillor Belton, you wish to speak first.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies that my back's to you. First off, I just want to clarify something that was said in the Bellway introduction. We have no preferred sites. We have potential sites. I think that's an important clarification. I'm speaking today as one of the ward councillors to register my strong objection to this application. I'm speaking out for the many residents in my area that have contacted me directly or have objected via the online portal. I will leave the technical element of the debate to the committee members and instead set out fundamentally why I cannot support this Greenbelt development. The application is being presented as if a reasonable and manageable addition to our community, but this is not a minor expansion. This is a major development that will permanently change this area, and it is being pursued in a way that once again places the risk, strain and consequence on the local residents and businesses. The report states that the proposal would not cause severe impact on the local highway network, but that conclusion does not reflect lived reality on the ground, and it's one I firmly contest, and I trust colleagues will challenge through the debate this evening. Braes Lane, Ashenden Road, Greenswood Lane are already heavily congested. The traffic from this site will add to the existing issues, as well as the traffic that we are still to expect once Kings Park completes. We cannot accept development on the basis that it should be fine, when residents already sit in traffic queues, already battle junction delays and already feel the safety risks rising as the network becomes overloaded. The report acknowledges the site is wholly within the Metropolitan Greenbelt, and yet it argues that national policy changes mean that it is now considered appropriate development. The new MPPF definition of grey belt is ambiguous at best, and a term my group rejected entirely in the last public consultation. I want to be crystal clear. Whatever technical language is used to justify it, this is still greenbelt erosion, plain and simple. This site is more than just land on a plan. It is agricultural, it is habitat, it is biodiversity. It is part of what protects the character of our villages and the space between communities. And once it's gone, it's gone. The report relies heavily on the council's housing land supply and explicitly states that our updated supply figure is 1.97 years, which triggers the MPPF tilted balance. Now let's be clear, we are only in that position because of a sudden change in housing targets set by government. that we are robustly challenging and intend to continue doing so through the local plan process. Having a low housing land supply because of a Whitehall algorithm should not become a free pass to build anywhere at any cost, regardless of whether the location is suitable and regardless of whether infrastructure exists. If anything, it should force us to be more careful, not less. The report suggests impacts can be mitigated through Section 106 contributions, including $219,000 for NHS, $1.84 million for primary education, $550 for early years and $840,000 for bus service enhancements. Now, on paper, those numbers sound reassuring, but residents have learned repeatedly that contributions do not automatically become capacity. This is not pessimism, it's evidence-based scepticism. That is no fault of the developers or the council, it's the system that fails us and why there are millions of pounds of unspent Section 106 sitting in pots, not helping our residents. Adding 300 houses without guaranteed delivery of infrastructure is not planning, it is gambling. This application is being driven by policy pressure and housing land supply figures, not by what this community can realistically sustain. It will increase congestion, worsen safety risks, and pile pressure onto our services. It permanently erodes Greenbelt and it asks residents to accept the consequences based on mitigation promises that history tells us may never fully materialise. This is not sustainable development, it is the continued expansion of our district without the infrastructure to match it, and I believe will bring significant harm. I strongly urge that this application be refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Belton. Any other visiting members who are not members of the committee wish to speak? I believe that's Phil Shaw, Councillor, if you would like to speak. I can't see you there, so.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so then we move on. Members, I have Councillor Squires-Coleman. You wish to speak? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I hope it's okay if I read. Can you please correct me if I'm wrong, if I've interpreted it incorrectly, but the supplementary agenda on page 7 notes that the ECC highways have no objection to the development if the additional works are carried out, but it is up to the council to decide whether the traffic impacts would be severe. Since there is no clear definition of severe, as we've heard repeatedly in council several times over the past weeks, and we do not yet have a local plan and updated traffic evidence from a new traffic assessment, how can I properly have a correct judgment today? Also, can I ask, given this, would it be possible to defer the application until the updated evidence is available, so I, and we all in this council chamber, can make a fully informed and lawful decision? Can I also note that the representative from Bellway said that 3 homes would be the worst case scenario? I hear that as him noting that the impact on the community would be very severe.
Thank you, Councillor Squires-Coleman. Katie, would you like to come back?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Squires-Coleman, it is true that on page 7 of the addendum, we have advised you that it is for the local planning authority rather than, you are the decision maker on this application, and what you have to grapple with is would this development result in a residual impact on the highway, which would be severe. But that paragraph goes on, and I think it's important to note, just so all members have hopefully read this, but it's highlighted that Essex County Council Highways Authority is the statutory consultee and has the technical expertise to enable thorough consideration of the quality of the submitted transport assessment. So I don't advise you that we need to wait for the outcome of the strategic transport assessment and that the final version of that, which is to inform the development of the new local plan. That's to inform where housing would be allocated throughout the district as a whole. In the determination of this application tonight, you do need to take account of the transport assessment that's been done to inform this specific application and the impacts of this specific development on the local highway network. We've got that, and we've got the Highways Authority as the technical expert saying that that is robust, and that the conclusions reached in that assessment are that the impacts would not result in a residual cumulative impact on the network, which would be severe. The advice, sorry, Chairman, just one moment, goes on to say that the Highways Authority, as the technical expert, I would advise you that you'd need to give quite significant weight to their advice to you. They've confirmed that it's robust, they do not object on highway grounds, and although I appreciate that there is a perception that the impacts will be significant, or even a perception they'll be severe, it has to be evidence-based, the decision-making. And that is what would be tested at a later point, you know, if this application were refused on those grounds.
Thank you, Katie. It's worthwhile pointing out at this point in the procedure that as a committee we can only refuse this application based on planning law and planning policy. We may not like it, but that is not grounds for refusal. It's just worth bearing that in mind as the debate goes on. So with that in mind, Councillor Lorraine Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me, or do you want me to stand up?
Yes, if you could get nice and close to the mic, that would be great.
Before I fall off this chair, so please bear with me. This application is the opposite side of my ward, but this is in my division. I cannot support it because, again, we've heard this is was green belt and now it's gone to grey belt. But why has that been decided? I've done a few notes, so please bear with me. I've concerns about traffic leaving the site. It's opposite King Edmund's School, the big roundabout. They have buses going in there. So we've got to be mindful of children. They say they're going to put a crossing in. Bloor Holmes said they were going to put a crossing in, and one of my colleagues will actually go into this most probably further, that Highways said it wasn't safe to put a crossing along that road, and the children would not cross it because it's nowhere near the school. So that's one concern I've got. But I say one of my colleagues may probably go into that more. And also, we have the Wharf that has 40-tonne lorries coming up and down there. So you've got the buses to the school, you've got the construction traffic, and then you've got the Wharf traffic. It's just not feasible. It's going to be an accident waiting to happen. That Braes Lane can't cope with the traffic that it has already. I'm afraid I can't support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I'm not reassured by the addendum. I'm especially concerned about Ashington Road, West Street, Hall Road Junction. That currently operates above theoretical capacity at peak times. Ashington Road, Daly Road, Roach Avenue over capacity at AM and PM peaks. Also, the report is relying on improvements to junctions from another planning application. How does that work? It's planning application 20/0063 OUT. It said it's something that's currently going to appeal. At this moment in time, we don't know the outcome of that appeal, but this report is assuming that this application is going to win the appeal and then the junctions. But it's also stating that the West Road, Hall Road, West Street, Hall Road junction, because of where it is, there's nothing you can do. It's basically next to a railway bridge. There's no way that you can make that junction any better. It's got to remain a mini roundabout in a very small area in a historic town. And you've got the railway station and everything there. And we add in the admittance in the report about Southend Road, Saturn Road above capacity at peak times. As, that also is a narrow road where I can't see that there's much that could be done with that. I see this as a cumulative effect. There's several junctions mentioned in this report, not just one, several that this report admits that this is going to have an impact on. So, there's 5 different junctions that this is going to have an impact on. Already in the transport assessment, that also admits that Ashington Road and everything, all the pinch points, is already an area of concern. And on top of that, as has already been stated, the airport have put in a holding objection. We don't know what the outcome of that is because we're waiting for that in full. I rather feel like Councillor Squires-Coleman does, that there is still a lot that's undetermined that could have a bearing on the outcome of this application. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Katie, you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, please. It is true that the impacts of traffic arising from this development have been modelled to the year 2030, taking into account improvements that will be made to certain junctions, but that has already been committed, if it was, from the approval of planning permission for the site known as land east of Ashington Road. There is no appeal outstanding. We know that those improvements will be delivered, and that's why the transport assessment for this application has taken those into account in the junction modelling and the impacts. I would just also say that just because the transport assessment modelling shows that one or more arms of a particular junction would operate above theoretical capacity in the peak AM or peak PM hour does not necessarily equate to a residual cumulative impact on the highway, which would be severe. That conclusion was reached in the appeal against the refusal of the development that I've just mentioned, the land east of Ashington Road site, where the inspector there had to grapple with impacts on highway network and would they be severe. And on the addendum on page 8, second paragraph, it talks about that. In that appeal, some arms of certain junctions were acknowledged to be operating above theoretical capacity, and the inspector, having listened to all the evidence in that appeal and looked at the transport assessment for that particular application in detail, came to the conclusion that, and it stated, paragraph 125, the residual cumulative impacts on the development wouldn't be severe. So it's please don't get the impression that just because a transport assessment says a particular arm is operating or modelled to operate above theoretical capacity equates necessarily to that test that you're being asked to judge the application on.
Thank you. It's worth noting, for the sake of the public who are here, this council have actually been taking the government to task on these loose terms. One of the ones that we are actually working on at the moment is taking the government to task on their definition of severe. There is no definition. So if we consider that the impact is severe, we can say that, but an inspector might think otherwise. So we're actually asking government to actually determine that, so as we can be a little bit more certain in the judgments that we make. So with having said that, we now have Councillor Knight. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Going repeating what other people have said, the residents are extremely concerned about the pressure of our already bursting roads, the health services and education. every day this week alone, I've sat in traffic in the morning and at night for in excess of 20 minutes trying to get to work. And I've got 3 options of which way I can go, and all 3 ways are completely unmanageable. Now, questions. Can officers confirm whether the vehicular access off Brays Lane is sufficient and safe to serve up to an additional 300 homes, considering the recent developments like Bloor Homes site that added to the congestion on Ashington Road? Number 2, can officers also explain how the additional demand on our already overstretched local NHS services, including Ashington Medical Centre, the practice in Leacombe Way, Hawkwell, and the Pusey family practice, will be mitigated? Finally, can officers clarify whether this proposal is part of the wider Rochford Park 2,000 home concept, and if not, how cumulative impacts from both developments are being considered in terms of traffic, infrastructure and local services that are already under severe pressure? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the first question was about the access, and the access into the site. I'm not sure if it was the access into the site or the fact that it's going to use Brays Lane onto Ashington Road, but either way, both of those access points have been considered by the Highway Authority, and the Highways Authority are satisfied that both would be safe and both would operate well within capacity. So that the access to the site, the 4th arm off the existing roundabout, the Highways Authority, responsible for ensuring that the highway is safe and operates in a manner that's acceptable, are saying that that access is suitable for the up to 300 dwellings that it would serve. That's the answer I can give you for that. In terms of the NHS services, so the Integrated Care Board are consulted on the application, and they're responsible for delivering primary care. So we as a council can only be led by their consideration of the application, their analysis of existing GP provision in the locality, whether that's at capacity. What they've asked for is a contribution which the developer is going to give and which we would put into a legal agreement to make sure they did. It is the responsibility ultimately then of the Integrated Care Board and the NHS to actually deliver and spend that money to increase capacity. In terms of the wider, the wider scheme that I think you were mentioning, the Rochford Park, this application is not related to that, and but the cumulative impacts of development, yes, are a consideration, but a developer putting in an application, as is before you tonight, can only be expected to grapple with the cumulative impacts of development that is committed. Okay, so whilst there is whilst there is other development in Rochford as a whole, perhaps tabled, that we know of that might be coming forward as an application, this application tonight's got to be determined on the information that we know exists.
Thank you, Katie. It's probably worthwhile actually underlining something, being as how we've got so many people of the public here tonight. We as a council are quite often given grief about national health provision and schools and the likes. Just to underline what Katie has said, we effectively just act as tax collectors from the builders to pass it over to these authorities. We do not have a say over what the NHS or education authorities actually provide at the end of the day. All we can do is facilitate them the situation to actually do what they say they will do. And we do have an issue with that, and we are taking them to task as a council, these various authorities. So do be assured that we are not ignoring that situation. Okay, Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to speak in general to the traffic assessment. First of all, I'm very concerned. We have this traffic assessment here. We were presented with a traffic assessment on Tuesday, and if you take into account the traffic assessment that was put together for the Bloor Homes development, they seem to be contradicting each other, and I find it very confusing to try and understand it all. First of all, I'd like to comment about the roundabout that is the entrance to King Edmund School. Firstly, there are no signs around that roundabout to warn of a school. We've been trying to resolve that particular problem. It is an HGV route, as previously been mentioned, and those HGVs predominantly will go out of Braes Lane, turn to the left, and then go down through the Ashenden Road. They can go through Lower Road, but that's not by choice because that's a difficult road for HGVs because of the low hedges and the low cables. The crossing that has been suggested at the roundabout, I have a problem with. I spent some considerable time, like Councillor Shaw, my county division is actually down the middle of the road there. One side of the road is Councillor Shaw, the other side is mine. We spent a considerable amount of time trying to find a way of locating a crossing for the children come out of King Edmunds between the roundabout and the end of Braes Lane where it joins Ashton Road. There isn't a safe place to put it because of what's already there, drop curbs, etc. So by putting the crossing the other side of the roundabout, okay, it's an advantage, it's a crossing, but I don't think it's going to get used. The kids will go the other way. I know that there is around 127,000 vehicles that use that Ashenden Road per week from a survey that I had carried out for speeding some few years ago. That doesn't take into account the development of Bloor Homes, and that's not complete. So adding another potential 600 cars into that scenario, it just doesn't make sense to me. There seems to be very little mitigation for the junction at Rectory Road, for the mini roundabout there. It's very difficult to do so, I accept that, because of the way the road is laid out. The same again with the Anne Boleyn roundabout. I'm sure everybody will know the Anne Boleyn roundabout. We know that some money was set aside some years ago from the Bloor development to improve there. We haven't actually been able to find out what those improvements were meant to be. We're still trying to find out. So there's no mitigation there. I'll pick up on a point that the objector speaker spoke about, was the amount of roadworks that are along Ashenden Road. There is a reason for that. It's a medieval road. And the base of the road is medieval. And I've often said it before, if Anne Boleyn was to come back tomorrow, she'd know her way around. It's the same roads. I'd like to, on the traffic assessment, on page 16, there is a map there which shows the potential bus route. It shows bus stops. I'm quite intrigued as to where those bus stops are. I'll pick on the one that says outside Rochford Station, bus stops, plural. There is only one bus stop there, and that's if you're travelling south-north. If you want to travel from north to south to get to Rochford Station, and I think that would be a good thing to encourage people to use the buses to do so, the nearest bus stops I can find, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, is there's one at the junction of Daly's Road, and there's one in the town centre. Well, there's one at East Street and West Street, the junction there. And then the next nearest bus stop is actually at the Horse and Groom. So if you're going to encourage people to travel from that site to Rochford Station, where are they going to get off the bus? It's all right going the other way. So I just don't understand that. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'll pick up on the drawings on page 18. There's one there about walking, and there is one there about cycling. I'm not a cyclist, I'll be honest and say. You can probably tell that. But I think that the way that's been laid out to say that you can cycle the distance it's suggested in 15 minutes on the road network that we have, you've either got to be a bit daft or very brave. I'm not quite sure which. And the same with the walking map that shows the distances around where you can walk to. Yes, if you're a fit, healthy 25-year-old, yeah, you can probably do that. I couldn't do it. And I'm sure that as a lot of elderly people, and we've got quite an older population, would not be able to achieve that. So I find that difficult to accept. With reference to the green belt, grey belt issue, I find that difficult to accept. I don't believe that this is grey belt. Grey belt is another one of these issues that getting clarification of exactly what that means is still going to be reliant on test cases going forward. At this stage, I don't accept that it is grey belt. I still feel that it is green belt, and I think it is harmful in the green belt area. Picking up on the drainage situation, as all sites will be required to do, is they cannot discharge water at a higher rate than the greenfield site. Okay, it goes into the existing ditch. Now, if my memory serves me correct, that ditch runs from west to east along Braes Lane. It's not a particularly good ditch. It's not particularly well maintained. So where is the mitigation to make sure, if that is the case, where that water is running? At this stage, Chairman, with what I've seen in this application, I'm sorry to say that I cannot accept or support it.
Thank you, Councillor Stepstow. Katie.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on. I'll just add a few more points, please. In terms of, I think there was mention of the Blore Homes development, which is the site known as Land East of Ashington Road. I just want to clarify. I'm not sure. I might have misheard, but the traffic impacts from that development have been considered in this applicant's transport assessment, because that is committed development. So although that site hasn't been built out and not all of those homes are occupied, the traffic impacts from all of the houses that have been approved at that site have been taken into account in the applicant's transport assessment and its conclusions. I don't know if you want me to go into the... Perhaps I should go into the grey belt definition, because this is quite important. So what I think I'll share on the screen. Right, now that's really small, so I might have to read that out for you. So, members, you are required in the determination of this application to consider whether this site meets the definition of grey belt. And officers have set out for you in the committee report how we have assessed the site against planning practice guidance, which gives you guidance on how to assess the strength of contribution that this site makes to 3 green belt purposes that are contained in the definition of grey belt. One of those purposes relates to the protection of historic towns. The council's own Greenbelt study in 2020 came to the conclusion that the whole of the council's Greenbelt was viewed as having a low contribution to that purpose. That study, though, was done without the benefit of the now planning practice guidance, which gives us this greater detail. But in relation to that purpose, this site is, officers are advising you, a distance from the historic core of Rochford, such that we would say it wouldn't strongly contribute to the protection of that historic setting of that town. So that's one aspect that you need to consider. The next aspect of considering the grey belt, and this is taken from the planning practice guidance, and actually I probably can zoom in Might be able to get that readable. So the next purpose that you need to consider when thinking about whether this site meets the grey belt definition is, does this site strongly contribute towards the prevention of the merger of towns? So it is true to say that this site is immediately adjacent to what we would say is a town. Rochford, Ashington, the settlement together is of a size that we would say is a town. But, and I showed you the aerial image. I can put the aerial image back on the screen if you need me to, but this site would connect to an existing town, but it wouldn't strongly contribute towards the prevention of the merger with another town, because there is no other town in that kind of western direction, in the east, thank you Mike, east of the site, towards which this development would project out towards. So we have come to the conclusion that this site would not strongly contribute to that purpose either. So the final purpose that you've got to consider, and the planning practice guidance here is what we have applied when we've considered this. And that's still quite small, isn't it? But sites that strongly contribute towards to the prevention of unrestricted sprawl of a built-up area. So does this site strongly contribute to that purpose or moderately contribute? Because that is key. If we have, officers have advised you in the committee report that we consider that this site would moderately contribute to this purpose. And the reason why we say moderate and not strong is because the planning practice guidance tells us that sites that moderately contribute towards this purpose are sites, the guidance advises, that would be partially enclosed by existing development such that new development would not result in an incongruous pattern of development in the Greenbelt. And when officers are looking back at the aerial image, the location plan for this development, we are of the view that it's enclosed on two sides by the existing built-up area of the adjacent settlement. And in that respect, it wouldn't result in what the strong contribution refers to, as an example, as an extended finger of development into the Greenbelt. Rather, it would be immediately north of the built-up area that was one of the council's allocations several years ago, and that's on the southern arm of the roundabout junction on Braes Lane, and it would be immediately west of the Ashington development to the western boundary. So, Chair, and it is set out in quite a lot of detail in the report, but it's a really key issue because whether this site is grey belt and meets that definition in national policy is key to whether it is appropriate development in the green belt or not.
Thank you, Katie. I believe Councillor Steptoe, you want to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to the assessment for the Bloor homes, I still feel that that is at odds to this. I remember sitting in that application and we felt then that it was a severe issue. We're adding more vehicles to it. I still think it's a severe issue. With regards to the green belt, grey belt assessment, we haven't had that report yet, so how do we know that this would have been included in that assessment? And with what the officer has just said, there's another one of those words that really don't have any great definition, and that's strongly. What does strongly mean? My definition may be different to yours, Chair. So I still feel that it doesn't comply.
Thank you, Captain Steptoe. There is a question that I have raised with officers in the past. One of the things that the definition of grey belt is actually very reliant on is the Land Quality Assessment, LQA, as we know it. What we're finding is that a lot of the major developments that are coming forward are actually being detailed as having a land quality assessment of 3, would it be A or B? Basically what that means, grade 1 is very good agricultural, grade 3 is low grade. We do actually have an example of a particular application, large application that is coming in the district, where they put it through as in the application being 3B, but we have later found evidence that it was actually listed previously as grade 1. So this is a question that is being worked on by us, and you can be assured, members of the public, that we are trying to be as thorough as we can on all these sort of things. Councillor Cripps, I believe it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I've been ticking off the subjects that other people have been bringing up because I try to avoid to duplicate what's already been said, but I'm afraid I'm going to break my own rule there. But I'll be brief. When we use the word severe with emphasis, it needs to come with the explanation that it's actually a judgment or an opinion in the end, because there is no definition of severe when it comes to the traffic. So when that's emphasised as it's not severe, what is severe? So it should also qualify it that it's going to be a judgment at the end of the day. That's just in passing on that particular point. I'm actually not a ward councillor at this end of the district, but I have spent the last 3 or 4 weeks going through the traffic assessment across the board in all districts and all wards. And I think it comes as no surprise as to anybody with our minor roads that we live with day in, day out. But even in the baseline, that's now situation, the case for now, which uses the 2022 and some other stuff to come up with the numbers. Out of the 29 junctions used, 12 of them are either F, E or D category. D is approaching capacity, E is at capacity, and F is beyond capacity. And there are 12 of those out of 29 that came up like that. One of those in the E category was in Ashington Road. Not this junction, but another junction not so far away down the road. And it's E classified. During the review of the traffic assessment, we were asked to put forward any other junctions that might be relevant to the bigger picture for adding to that. I have requested Brays Lane Junction with Ashing Road to be modelled to prove it once and for all. But the main point, moving off of that, I want to make is, and as the officer said, it's up to us as the council to make the decision. In terms of the grey belt, which was introduced via the consultation in the 4th quarter of 2024, at that point it was all about redundant garages, unused car parks and scruffy poor quality land. Over time it's been adopted and it's much more complicated now. In fact, I counted it up, and in the report there's 20 paragraphs to explain it. And I think that speaks for itself. I don't think it's equitable for councils. The decisions which have already been mentioned earlier on local plan and 5-year supply. And I'll reiterate what somebody else said earlier. Overnight, our targets were doubled and became live that next morning. I don't think that is equitable for the council at all. Land supply is the same. The number has been crushed by the new target. Normally, they use 3 years, the last 3 years, to calculate their 5-year land supply. This new situation with 1.97, which the applicant mentioned, is directly due to overnight it becomes untenable for us to do anything but. My view is there should have been a transition period there, at least to give us a chance to find out whether that was even possible to achieve, which I think we all know anyway. But I just really feel that those two things, no local plan, no 5-year supply, they're emphasised. But it's been forced upon us. The government's basically created that situation by having no movement or timescale before it's brought into play. And if you dig into the reasoning behind the grey belt, that those two things feature heavily in there. So for me, I'm sorry, but as an individual, I don't think that's a quittable way of doing things. I do appreciate the officers are compromised by that.
Yeah, Councillor Cripps, can I just ask you, obviously we're in general agreement about the general policy problems that we have going forward, but this particular site, are there any particular questions on this particular application that you want to put to officers?
Well, we're referring to the 1.97 on the 5-year supply, so that's what it is.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Katie, do you want to come back on anything there?
I understand your point clearly about the fact that the council is undertaking their own transport assessment to inform the local plan. And I think I've made the point already tonight that this application tonight has to be determined based on the transport assessment that's been done to model the impacts of this particular application. And the Braes Lane Ashenden Road junction has been modelled as part of the transport assessment that's been done for this application. I understand your points about the grey belt. It does have a much wider definition now. Just to clarify a point though, and I think this might be helpful, I'll just share the screen again. So this is the definition of the grey belt in national policy. So this is the definition that members need to use to consider this site. And it says, for the purpose of decision making, grey belt is defined as land in the green belt comprising previously developed land and or any other land that in either case does not strongly contribute to either purposes A, B or D. And those are the purposes that I went through with you. And those the strength of contribution a site makes to those purposes. So whether it's a strong contribution or a moderate contribution, the planning practice guidance, which I appreciate you probably couldn't read on the screen, but I was talking you through, is what we have to apply, or that's the guidance available to us to come to those judgments about whether this site is grey belt or not. We might not want to think it is, but the job to do is to assess it in relation to the definition of grey belt and in relation to the planning practice guidance, which provides you with more detail. I should add that the grey belt definition does have an additional sentence on it, and that is dealt with in the report. It's to do with, are there strong reasons to refuse in relation to flood risk and the like. So, but that's dealt with in the report as well. Chair, I don't... it's just in terms of the transition period. Again, Councillor Cripps, I understand your, view that there should have been a transition period, but in determining this application tonight, what you are faced with is the fact of the matter. The council does not, cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, whether we think we should have to or not. We can't really take into account in the decision making. It is what it is, which I think you acknowledge, and that has to play into the decision making tonight as set out in the officer report.
Thank you, Katie. I think that ably demonstrates the problems that have been foisted on us by the changes that the government have actually put onto us. So moving on, Councillor Stuart Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 points that I'd like to raise. The first is that Active Travel England recommended a deferral pending some responses. And the question is, did we get those responses? And if we did, have they been...
Sorry, can you speak a bit closer to the mic?
Sorry. Active Travel England wrote to the council with a holding response for recommending deferral. Did they get the answers from the developer, and have they been incorporated into the report? The second point is that I am very sympathetic towards social housing and affordable housing, and every little bit helps. But this seems to be the thing that is really selling this development. This has been right at the forefront. And so my question is, how do we guarantee that we get these affordable houses built, and that at some point in the future these are not economically viable, and therefore we just get a financial contribution? So is there anything that we can do to make sure that happens? And then my final point is Essex County Council, with amazing foresight, wrote a letter on the 10th of November 2023, which should actually say 2025, about this development. And what they have to say, and it's really unusual language for Essex County Council, they say this application site is not designated for development in a local plan, and therefore has not been considered comprehensively within the wider growth context in the local planning authority area. Local plans play a crucial role for Essex County Council as a key infrastructure and service provider in ensuring that the full infrastructure needs as a result of development are effectively considered and planned for. This is from the infrastructure planning team. And then it goes on further to say that piecemeal development risks ineffective and at times insufficient infrastructure, planning and delivery to the detriment of local services and facilities for residents. It says the application site is located within the Green Belt and without local plan support, and it is considered a premature piecemeal development on protected Green Belt that needs to be properly planned for within the context of the local plan. Now, these are really strong words. Those of us that have been on the development committee for a while know that normally it's either this or it could be that. But this is a really strong statement from Essex County Council. And I do wonder whether if we rush to make a decision today, that we'll have adverse impacts on any future plans which have been strategically planned. So we want to try and build truly sustainable communities, not just plonk a load of houses on a site. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Councillor Watson. Katie, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, bear with me a second. Active Travel England, sorry, yes, I was just finding the consultation response, which is summarised in the report. So it talks about a travel plan, it talks about improvements to footways and cycleways and public rights of ways and crossings. It talks about the cycle lane, permeability through the site, and a detailed parking strategy. Those are things that we have considered, having received that. So, for instance, things like the detailed parking strategy with secure and inclusive and accessible provision is something that Active Travel England haven't recognised that this is an outline application with many of the details to come if this were granted permission to come in a later reserved matters application. So essentially we have ticked that one off essentially as will be considered at a later date. In terms of the enhanced site permeability, I think what Active Travel England were thinking would be ideal, but can't always be delivered when you have existing neighbouring development, is more connections from this site through to the existing settlements, so like to Victory Lane and other points to the west. And we did talk to the developer about that and explored that, but the land ownership didn't allow for those additional connections which would have enabled greater pedestrian permeability. So we did consider that. The cycle lane we discussed with the Highways Authority in terms of what improvements can physically be delivered and that is a requirement of the 106. It's a short section of additional cycle lane along Ashington Road. So we have considered those things that Active England highlighted to us. We think we've dealt with them as best we can and appropriately. In terms of affordable housing, and I understand your question is about we need to ensure that actually you get affordable housing delivered on the site rather than, a request coming later down the line, not viable, we need to have a contribution instead. So the requirement is that the site deliver 50% affordable housing, and the council's own policy would seek that split to be 80-20 in terms of rented versus intermediate or shared ownership. Our strategic housing team at the council have advised that that split should be applied to the whole of the 50%, which the developer has accepted, and that will be secured through the legal agreement. If the developer at any point were granted permission and then wanted to or needed to put forward a request for that mix to be changed or for us to consider a financial contribution in lieu of some or all, it would come back to committee because there would need to be a change to the legal agreement that you've agreed. And then at that point, you can interrogate that with all the financial viability information that would go alongside that. You then had a point about the Essex County Council infrastructure planning team's response, and they're making a broad point, I think, that in an ideal world, local authorities plan for new development by forward planning in a local plan, allocating sites for development that they see are most appropriate to deliver that in a strategic way. And by doing that, the council can also have an infrastructure delivery plan in place to make sure that all the infrastructure is, delivered to in accordance with the amount of housing that is set in that plan. But we're not in that position at the moment, yet we are still faced with determining an application. And as set out in, it's in the committee report, but bear with me, I don't know the exact page number, but there is a section that advises you specifically in relation to prematurity. And I'm going to find it so that I can explain it to you. It's paragraph 2.3 on page 29, and I could talk you through it really, but the National Planning Policy states that arguments that an application is premature are unlikely to justify a refusal of planning permission other than in limited circumstances, and it goes on to set out what they are. And so given the stage at which Rochford's local plan is at, and it's kind of quite early in that process, we don't think much weight can be attached to that. And so I think what the council are faced with is having to determine this application now in the absence of the new local plan.
Thank you, Katie. It's probably worthwhile pointing out at this... sorry, Councillor Wilson, are you happy with that response? Yes? Okay, thank you. Probably worthwhile pointing out at this point in time, it has been suggested a few times that the application be deferred until after the Greenbelt assessment has been done. We've taken advice on that and we can't do that legally. Okay, we would be in trouble if we did it for that reason. So I thought it was just worthwhile actually pointing that out to members of the public that are here. Councillor Loreen Shaw, I believe you want to come back again.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I wait and see how this carries on, please, and then come?
Certainly, certainly. Councillor Linden, then, your turn.
Thank you. We need new homes, we need affordable homes, and we need infrastructure. This plan is offering all of it. But I feel as if we're being hoodwinked into the fact that we need to get our house in order first. We're working very hard to get our house in order. Councillor Cripps has mentioned, and I mentioned in the meeting the other night, we're at 1.97. We were at 4.5, 4.8. those figures were forced upon us.
Sorry, for the sake of the public here, can I just say that that's for the 5-year housing supply?
5-year housing. You can fill in the gaps at any time you wish to on that. I feel as if, and it's been mentioned twice in this report, the fact that because of that situation, it's almost like, look, we're coming along, we're going to do this for you, aren't we wonderful? No, it's not the situation. We shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. You've taken a little bit of my thunder away by saying what you just said. If you look at outright planning, if we refuse it, it can go to appeal. If we don't come up with any material reasons for refusal, we can also go to appeal. If we are going to refuse, we've got to think of the reasons for that refusal. I actually feel with the fact that we do have our experts in our offices in the room, but what I've heard tonight from our councillors, from the members, there is enough reason there for it to be deferred, to go away, to have a rethink in response to the material matters on refusal. As I said, if we refuse tonight, it could go to appeal, and if it goes to appeal, it won't put us in the strong position as if we can defer it. And I would like that explaining a little bit further regarding why we cannot defer it, because I believe that tonight we've learned enough information that has come forward for us to actually reconsider the decision, because I do believe that we will find material matters on how we can actually refuse this. At this moment in time, I cannot support this going through, but I am concerned, particularly on appeals, in respect of what might happen then. So legally, can we find a way where we can actually defer? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Katie, before I say anything, did you want to come back on that at all? Yes, no?
I can. Usually an application for deferral would be for some specific point. I can't see a point on which you would want to defer the application. But if you do, then you would need to explain why you would want to defer the application. Otherwise, I think what the council are being asked to, the applicant has submitted their application with their supporting documentation, statutory consultees have commented, and that's all set out in the report. So, yes, whilst the committee could look to defer, I think we'd need to understand on what basis.
Thank you. On incomplete evidence, at this moment in time, you're making your decision to actually pass our ability to be able to make a decision as members to the Director of Place. You're asking us to actually tonight recommend approval for outline planning. You're then asking us to propose that the resolves that the delegate authority to the Director of Place to approve planning permission with the conditions in place. What I'm saying is you've heard enough information tonight, and I do understand that we do have to refuse on planning matters, but I believe you've heard enough information tonight to be able to defer it so that a decision can be made further down the road when we've got all of the relevant information back.
Okay, we have our council legal representation here with us tonight, and I think I would like to ask Nagla if she could contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. What I would advise the committee is that in order to defer for incomplete evidence, you have to say what the incomplete evidence is. You have a transport assessment that the Highways Authority has assessed and considers to be robust. So you would need to specify what is the information that you're lacking that would allow you to determine this matter. And the other thing is that you mentioned there's a risk of an appeal if not deferred, but there's equally a risk of an appeal for what we call non-determination, which is that you fail to make a decision within specified timescales. And in that situation, you wouldn't have even put your objections forward, if you see what I mean. And what I would say is it is really important that your decision is based on evidence. And I know there are strong, I've heard very clearly the strong feelings about the impact of the highways on the highways network. But what I'd say to you is some of this, there's an overlap with what is called the Bloor-Holmes appeal, where the inspector has already considered these matters where you have lost the appeal on exactly these grounds. So that appeal decision is a relevant material consideration that you need to take into account. And so for that reason, you would need to be very specific about what further evidence you want from the from the officers to defer this matter. Alternatively, you'd need to specify on what grounds you would disagree with the assessment that you've been presented with in the report by officers on highways grounds. So that is the way that you would be making a sound decision that is defensible and doesn't put you at risk of costs. That's the other thing, because if it's found to be unreasonable because there was no evidence, the council is at risk of costs, not only at losing the appeal, but also having to pay costs for unreasonable behaviour. So that is one of my duties here as the legal advisor to you as decision makers that I need to point out.
Thank you. I thought that would be your response. In fact, I was expecting it. I still believe that we've got enough evidence. Whether we can have a 10-minute recess to talk amongst ourselves and come up with something, I mean, particularly in Councillor Cripp's situation, but I still strongly believe that what I've heard tonight, what I know about the area, and also the fact that they got in here, I don't like the emphasis that's been put on the fact that aren't we being kind to you because you need your housing, and it's not. That is not the case, and I think we need to discuss that. I'm just looking for a way. If we refuse, then there's going to be issues going forward. If we defer, we might have an opportunity to actually discuss with these guys are the experts, but these guys live in the area. We live in the area. These guys live in the area. We really need a fair. This has been pushed upon us. You can see this has been pushed upon us. This isn't a planning application. This is an outline planning application asking us to go, yeah, okay, and then hand it over to the director of place. I think we've had enough evidence tonight to actually look at the reasons. I understand, I hear what you're saying, and maybe we can come up with a specific reason where we can do it. And maybe the officers can then look at that going forward. Mr. Chair, it's out of my hands now, but if you could, that is my thoughts on it.
We've got two more members that want to actually speak. Once we've had that, I think then we need to have a bit of a discussion. Back to our legal representative, Nagla.
Thank you, Chair. The only other thing I would say to you is that the debate about what evidence is missing should really be taking place in public so that everybody can understand the reasons that you have come to that decision. So we can take you through the relevant tests and you can tell us where you disagree, right? It's all in the report what the relevant tests are, and you can tell us where you disagree. If you want to take legal advice in confidence, you can do that as well. But I would suggest that we have a minded to, after you finish the debate, you have a minded to consideration, and then we see whether you need to obtain legal advice in closed session. But the debate itself about what evidence it is that's lacking should really take place in public so everybody can understand the reasons. There's nothing confidential, legally confidential about that, is all I wanted to say.
And that is why we have legal representation here.
Total transparency as far as I'm concerned. I'm just looking for, looking amongst us, we're all sitting there, Councillor Cripps in particular, who's been through 2 years of planning, Councillor Shaw, etc., and Councillor Steptoe on Essex County Council. We've got the mind, we've got the skill set in here, but there's a reason why this has been brought to Council, because our officers haven't found any reason where they can actually refuse it on material planning. So we've got to find a reason where we can defer it. So I will take your advice, but I'll be led by the chair.
Okay, I think we need to actually hear the final two members who I've got listed who are waiting to speak, and then we will discuss your points. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back, and let me come back later with this people saying, members saying they want to defer it. If we defer this, can I ask that we have a KC opinion, that we have them in, so they can answer the questions that we've already asked, that we're not happy with we're happy with some of the answers. Our officers have taken note of all our questions. Some have been answered, some I feel that haven't, and I would prefer that we have a KC in on this so we get the proper legal advice. And the reason I'm asking this, Chairman, because you and I went through Bloor and we went through hell with the QC at the time on the appeal, and I don't want any member to have to go through that, so I'd prefer to have it all belt and braces done before anything like that happens. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that. I have still got the scars to count on that one. Councillor Vilma-Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just as a side point, really, carrying on from what Councillor Lorraine Shaw has said, whilst I wasn't involved, I have, as yourself as Chair, attended an appeal, and they are anything but pleasant. And if you don't have all your facts and your evidence, then that's really not a good place to be. I'd just like to say that I think this is the wrong place, the wrong time, this application. However, I just have real concerns because there's lots of organisations that I feel should object, just haven't. And I really don't understand why, and I have no comment to make apart from what's happening here. I do have a question through you, Chair, for the officers, please. London Southend Airport, in the report, page 71, it says, following our review of the proposed development, we will need to put in a holding objection until the following information is provided. And then it lists the information that they need. Two questions, really. First of all, would that be one of the reasons, as alluded to from Councillor Linden? And secondly, when would you expect the report from London Southend Airport to come through? So if that could be a reason, how much time would that give us? Thank you.
Chair,
Katie.
Thank you. What London Southend Airport require is the outcome of a flight procedure assessment. So they're not saying that they necessarily anticipate, the development here being a problem for safeguarding of the airport, but as a technicality, they do need to see the outcome of this assessment. The developer has already commissioned that with the airport, so that is underway. It's just not ready for us to be able to have gone back to the airport before tonight to say categorically they don't object. I think what we anticipate is that it won't flag anything. So what we're recommending to you is that you delegate to the head of place if anything did come out in terms of that flight procedure assessment, then it would come back to you. So that's the approach that we recommended that you take on another application in Hockley that tail end of last year, and that's what members did with that application. So that sort of procedural element, we would just recommend that you do again.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Sorry, pregnant pause there. I'm just going to allow Councillor Steptoe to come back. We've got them all coming back now.
Thank
I think we do need to have thorough debate here, so I will allow it. But if the last two speakers can be as brief as possible, I would appreciate it because we are running out of time. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Reading the room with the comments that members have made, I think if you put it to the vote for approval, I don't think you're going to get support. Equally as much, I think members are worried about refusing it and not having sufficient grounds to refuse it. So picking up on Councillor Shaw's suggestion there, that we put this to QC, it is obviously very strongly, the members are very strong against approving this because they're just not happy with it. So I would suggest that we consider what Councillor Shaw has suggested and that we defer subject to having conversation with QC, or KC as it is now, to correct myself.
Councillor Cripps, quickly.
She's for Katie. She's just explained the airport objection, which is still in limbo. Active travel also put in a holding objection as well. Could you explain the status of that, please?
I think the active travel one you've already covered, haven't you?
I can cover it again if you want me to. But
Very quickly.
yeah, I mean the active travel, London Southend Airport consultation and holding response carries a little bit more weight in the decision making because they are responsible for the safeguarding of an airport. And legal advice could give you more information around that if you need it. But the active travel England response, it asked for certain things to be explored, if you like, in addition. And what I'd said earlier is that we have explored those items. Some of those things would be matters that would be dealt with at a later stage if the council were minded to, did grant outline permission. And others of those things we've explored with the developer already and, we think have been dealt with satisfactorily. If you need me to go into the detail of how we've done that again, I can.
Are you okay?
No, I understand your point, but active travel is actually directly related to something I meant to bring up earlier and forgotten. I'm sorry. And that is this modal shift approach that doesn't appear to have any evidence base to go on. It appears to be opinion again. And we're supposed to be doing evidence-based situation, and the flavour of the month at the moment is this modal shift, but there's no backing for it, no definition of it, and it directly relates really to the active travel thing, because it's all part of the one getting people out of cars and so on. So there's an item there that's not an holding objection, but there is no basis there.
Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up the discussion on this now. One of the things that I do find that as members we have a real problem with is we get this a week before committee. We are expected to actually read through all this lot and bring our objections preferably before. And it's a difficult job. I've asked a number of questions on the transport assessment. I need to underline at this point that along with Councillor Shaw, she and I were the witnesses for the council on the Bloor application, and I took lead on the transport side of things. I have come to this particular committee open-minded. So bearing that in mind, one of the things that I found very difficult to, I should just say, I've had an answer here from the officers, but I think it's right that the public should hear what that answer is. When you look at the addendum that we have been given yesterday, one of the things that is listed in there is the Southend Road, Sutton Road, which we colloquially know as the Anne Boleyn junction. They conclude that there should be no there's no problem there, and that should be okay. However, the Bloor application concluded that there needed to be work done there. So to my mind, that kind of it was professionals conflicting each other. And from a point of view of being on the committee and trying to make the decision, that makes it very difficult because we have to rely on professional advice that we get. Now, also we've got the situation where the junctions along Ashington Road are noted as being at capacity or near. The Bloor application did actually conclude and was agreed by all parties that Ashington Road would be full to capacity at 2028. And so with that in mind, I was rather surprised to see that there was no recommendation for anything other than the mitigation on the very adjacent junctions in the actual report. I think at this point it would probably be best if I actually asked Katie to come back and explain the answer that she gave to me over those points. Can I give that over to you, please, Katie?
Sorry. Yes, so it is the case, and it's set out in the addendum that the transport assessment that's been carried out for this application has been done in relation to a traffic count that was carried out in June last year. And then the transport assessment essentially puts that information together with the anticipated traffic movements from the development into a standard industry transport modelling tool. And the outcome, or 5 junctions have been assessed in the applicant's transport assessment, one of which is the Southend Road, Sutton Road junction, the Amber Lynn. And the conclusion in the transport assessment for this Braes Lane application is that there would not be any exceedance of theoretical capacity of that junction as a result of this development projected forward to 2030. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The Essex County Council Highways Authority, and I'm not a highway engineer, the Highways Authority are tasked with interrogating the transport assessment that the applicant submits. They are satisfied with it, and that's set out in the addendum report. So they're satisfied that the impact of the development traffic on that particular junction that Councillor Reeve mentioned, the Southend Road, Sutton Road junction, would not be significant. And that the overall conclusion is that, again, this residual cumulative impact on the highway network would not be severe. That's what Essex County Council Highways Authority's advice to you is.
Thank you, Katie. I think that was useful to actually put that in. Now, look, I'm mindful of the time. I think we have had a robust debate. It has been suggested that we defer. Now, I've taken legal advice on this, and if we are going to do this, then we need to have specific reasons for it. So I would like the discussion now to actually swap to giving specific reasons that will stand up under law and under policy that we can use for deferment. I will be moving a motion if there is in... Sorry, hang on a minute. we need... Give me a moment. Right, okay. Well, look, the discussion seems to have gone along the lines of deferment tonight, so I'm going to propose deferment. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, happy to second it, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Steptoe, thank you. All those in favour? Okay. We now have to come up with specific reasons that hold up under law and policy. So with that in mind, I'll open up the conversation, and can we keep it to that and not back on to stuff that we've already talked about? Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. It seems to me that the London Southend Airport are a potential showstopper, and that there should be a lot of weight given to that. They haven't had the answers that they haven't had the answers that they need yet, so that will be grounds for deferment until we get till they give us satisfactory answers that this can go ahead?
What I'm going to do is, after each point that is raised, I'm going to ask for assessment either from our officers or our legal representation. So on that point, can I? Who's going to come in on it? Officers or legal? Officers. Sorry, I will endeavour to speak up louder, or I'll eat my microphone. Okay, others, so if I can just remind you all, please, to be right close to your mics. Might sound very loud to you, but it may not sound loud to everyone else. Okay, so on that point, officers, do we have a basis for deferment on that particular point?
I would just like clarification, I suppose, from my understanding is that the only matter in which you would be deferring this application? So if London Southend Airport then came back in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long it takes for this flight procedure assessment to be completed, and if that says, if they then remove their holding objection, if that's the only point of deferral, is that...
I think we can quite clearly expect that there will be plenty more, but I would, what I'm asking you for is on specific points, would they hold up as part of the deferment?
I think Nagla would like to speak.
Nagla.
The short answer is yes, because a decision can't actually be issued until that holding objection is removed, because they have a special status, being a safeguarded aerodrome, which is why the recommendation is phrased the way it is. So I'm satisfied that that's a good reason for deferral for later consideration, if it's something that you want to take into account in coming to a final decision.
Thank you. Okay, so that's number one. I think we're going to Councillor Squires-Coleman next.
Thank you, Chair. In my mind, and I might be just lacking understanding, but I do not understand how I can make a decision when I do not know the definition of severe. And I know you've put in a request of a clarification on that. So in my mind, that's reason for deferment.
Unfortunately, I can tell you now that won't wait, because my actual experience was one of the reasons being why we tried to get the application refused for Bloor was on that very point, and the appeal went against us. We did not win that, so unfortunately that one is clear. However, we are writing to government for clarification on what that standard is. So you can be assured on that. So hopefully we'll have some guidance in the future. We live in hope. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I would say Active Travel England. It says they can't support the application. And I'm not going to read it all, but what they want to say is to move towards compliance, the applicant must, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't really want to add them up, and that's why I think we should actually go for deferment until we actually do what the applicant does, what Active Travel wants. Thank you. I'd seek legal advice on that.
Anyone want to come back on that?
I mean, I could take you through again why I think... Nagla?
The short answer is no, because Katie has already explained that that objection has in fact been resolved by the measures that are being put in place and the mitigation proposed, and they don't have an objection anymore. It's a historic objection that's reported in the report. Yes.
Where does that actually say that? Because if that's actually has been mitigated, this should not be in the report. So this...
We have to report all of the objections.
Sorry, can you come to your microphone a bit?
Oh, sorry. Yes. What my question was, why is this still in the report? And if it's been mitigated, there should be something below this where it says Active Travel are not supportive, and then say they have agreed X, Y, Z, and that hasn't actually happened. If it's somewhere else in the report, and I always read them, as you know, Chair, I can't find that.
Chair.
So I'm sorry if I've made a mistake there. Thank you.
Katie.
No, I don't think you have. Sorry, I might have caused confusion. Apologies if I did. I think in answer to the original point that was raised about the active travel response, what I said, or I'm saying now more clearly, hopefully, is that officers considered that. So we considered that active travel, England's view was that these additional things should be explored, and they have been explored. So I can take you through that again if you want to. So in terms of, work them back, but point 5 of active travel's response is that they're saying the applicant must provide a detailed cycle parking strategy with secure, inclusive and accessible provision. And what active travel have failed to recognise is that this is an outline application. So all of that detail will come at a later reserve matters stage. Sometimes that happens with some consultees. They look at the application and they just try to give us all the detail that they want. And what we do is we sift out and think, what of those things do we need to deal with now in an outline application and what will be dealt with later? Point 4 was that we're asking for enhanced site permeability. You might recall I talked about what they're saying was, when you look at the site, the only pedestrian access point is to the south. And what they were saying was, could you explore this site linking to the north or to the west? And we've explored that with the developer. So we've looked to see if we could get connections through to the west to allow existing residents, potentially to walk through to this site in the future, and vice versa. But because of site ownership constraints, it wasn't possible. So in relation to all of these points, I think officers have already explored them with the developer and thought through whether we need to explore them anymore.
Thank you. Councillor Linden?
Yes, I'll be very quick. It's not a reason, but a point. While I was sitting in that very chair you're sitting in, my little grey cells remember something about if none of us vote, it's automatically deferred for 8 weeks until the decision. I'm sure there was something in that. I'm looking at our legal representation. If that was the case, obviously, then we don't need to make any specific points at this moment in time.
Just give us a moment, we'll just check that in the Constitution. While we're looking at that, Councillor Belton has requested to ask a question, and yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was just checking as I'm a visiting member. I wondered, could we ask for an independent assessment of the Anne Boleyn roundabout junction, given the conflicting data that you've already identified, Chair? I just wonder, is that a reason for deferment, because we've got conflicting data that we'd like to have independently assessed?
Katie, I know we've discussed this one at length, but do you want to come back on that?
You could, I suppose. I mean, legal advice will probably, I don't know if they'll take a different view to me. I think you could defer the decision to get an independent assessment. It's not, I suppose that could happen if.
I have to be on. You know my concerns. Let me say about this. I mean. These are based on my concerns are based on the material that is in front of us. So I'm not coming to this committee without an open mind, and I want to underline that to the developer. But I think there are some very clear conflictions within the professional reports that we have actually been presented with, and so if you feel that is an item that we could defer on, I would like that included.
I mean, to be clear, we have discussed this at length. I have discussed this at length with the Highway Authority, and they do not consider that we need any further information about the impacts of this development on that specific junction. They are satisfied that the transport assessment appropriately considers the impact of that junction and that it would not overall be severe.
I would be very interested. The highways assessment company that were employed by Bloor were a company called Ardent. I'd be very interested to see what they would actually comment about the one that we have here from Iceni, because I think if they come back and conclude what Iceni has said, then okay, fair enough. I think it would serve to say, okay, maybe Iceni have got it right. But if Ardent, having been the company that have actually pointed out the problems in the past, actually do have concerns about Iceni's report, then I think we should know, because it does seem like an obvious question to ask of the company that actually originally wrote the first report. So yes, sorry, Katie, back to you.
Sorry, I suppose my only comment would be, I think we'd need to be clear about whether you are asking officers to get the applicant's transport assessment sort of, if you like, verified, but checked over by another consultant. Because if in the alternative you are asking for a full reassessment of the impact of that on that junction, because that relies on traffic count data. So it depends at what point you're taking it back to, you having you taking issue with that element of the transport assessment. If it's just that you would like an independent view on the existing transport assessment that's been done in respect of the impact on that specific junction, that is easier to accommodate, potentially more swiftly achieved. And I think Nagla wanted to say something. So,
Nagla.
I also don't think you can require Ardent to comment on Iceni's report. If you feel that you don't have enough information about the N-Boleyn junction, then I would recommend that you require further evidence and an assessment to be carried out, and that is the gap that you've identified.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe.
Yes, Chairman. Anne Boleyn roundabout is right bang in the middle of my division. And with regards to the Bloor development, there was some funding set aside for some improvements there. Despite trying many times, I've yet to find out what that is. They've never come back to me and said exactly. So I would be very interested from that point of view as well.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Harrison spoke very eloquently, and I was totally absorbed with his plea, which I felt was excellent. And he mentioned the grey belt definition, which is a grey area, excuse the pun, but this, to me, is green belt under the recognised definition, and it's also arable land, and I'm not sure whether we can challenge on the basis that this is good arable land, and until this country is self-sufficient with food, which it's not, I think we should value our arable land and make the most of it. It could be that it could be useful for, grade 1 crops rather than its current use. So that's my thoughts.
I think what you're talking about is the land quality assessment, the LQA, because in the report here that's given a 3. And there have been questions raised about that. When I've asked questions about that, we're again in the same situation where the Environment Agency, who actually do this particular assessment, we are beholding to their results. Although we are questioning it, it's a long and difficult process, which I don't think we can actually lean on tonight. As I said, there is another site in the area that actually is being questioned on this very point. I think we're at a stage now where we need to sum up what we've actually got and if we've got enough for deferment. So, Katie, could I ask you to read back the reason for deferment that we've come up? Hopefully someone's been making notes. No? Oh, Nagla, sorry.
So I've taken down taken note of the LSA objection, the London South Airport objection. You want an independent assessment of the Anne Boleyn junction. And Councillor Mrs. Shaw, she asked for a KC opinion, but we would need to know what questions you want to ask the KC, please.
Thank you. I'd like to have the KC's opinion on Greenbelt, Greybelt. I know we've had our officer's opinion. I would like a KC's opinion on this, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got 3 reasons for deferment. Is that what we're saying? Yeah. Okay. Right, the procedure we have to do now, because we've already agreed to a deferment, we have to now agree to the reasons for deferment. So if I could ask Nagla just to read them out, and then we will vote on those reasons. Thank you.
A deferral on the basis that you want to await the outcome of the London South End Airport objection. And then you say for or against.
Do we want to do them individually or all together?
Then we have a proper record, Chair.
Okay, so proper record. Okay, on that first reason for deferral, can I have those in favour of that being included? That is unanimous. Thank you.
A deferral for an independent assessment of the Anne Boleyn junction.
Those for? Unanimous again. Thank you.
A deferral for a KC opinion about the prospects of a KC opinion on the green belt, grey belt issue.
It would be green belt, grey belt classification. Yeah. Okay. Those in favour? Thank you. Right. So that item is deferred, but I'd like to just speak directly to the developer. In this case, we are not, and I emphasise, we are not trying to not determine. We need to be sure on what we're bringing forward. So I would very much appreciate it if you take it back to your company with that in mind, that we're not trying to be deliberately obstructive, but we live in the area and we do have concerns. All right? Thank you very much. Okay, so that's... we're going to move on to the next item in the agenda.
Can we have a break?
So, hang on a minute, hang on. You're doing it again, aren't you?
I am. Sorry.
What I was going to suggest was a 5-minute break to allow those who want to leave, because we have got one more small item on the agenda to consider. Thank you very much for your attendance, everyone. We're going to have a comfort break for 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back, members. Thank you for coming back. Okay, so we're going on now to item 4. This is reference 25/00764/full, and that is the Mill Hall, Bellingham Lane, Rayleigh, Essex. Mike Stranks will present the report. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a note before we get into it. Members are able, as members of this committee, to determine the application, but they have to consider if they would have an interest if they've been part of the member side that has led to this proposal. This is a proposal that's the council submitting to itself. So this is the planning application. As a planning committee, you can determine it. But if you've had the prior involvement in getting it here through other committees, the officer advises for you to consider before we get further if you have an interest that you should declare.
So, right, as a non-member, Councillor Belton.
I was just going to state, as someone, obviously I won't be voting anyway as a non-member, but the process to get to this particular position was economic development for the last 2 administrations, this administration and the previous one, so that might help members determine if they feel they're conflicted. I don't think any other committee has had an involvement, but I'm open to be challenged on that, but just to try and help in terms of the direction, that would be my understanding of this application, economic development, this administration and the previous one.
Could I make a suggestion that you move back to the non-member seats rather than have to stay in those rather uncomfortable ones there? Councillor Shaw.
I'd like clarification, Mike, please. We're on the development committee. When Mill Hall come through, have we got an interest or not?
Sorry, I didn't understand that. You're saying...
You're just saying... Oh, sorry, now I'm shouting. Sorry. You're saying we should declare an interest, but if we were on the development committee when the Mill Hall developments were going through, have we got an interest? Is it a yes or no, please? I'm a bit confused.
In terms of this committee,
Yeah.
no.
Right.
But the question was asked deliberately, as it's a council application, various members that the leader was talking about being involvement on the economic development side. As planners, we don't know your other roles and where you're, and then all of a sudden you arrive from those functions to the development committee, and the advice is that if you've had input into producing this application, you would have an interest now. You'd be voting for, if you like, your own work rather than impartially. It's just whether you have to consider that. We don't know.
I think if I could just be clear on this, I've been on the working group for the Mill Hall. I don't consider that I need to declare an interest in this because I have had nothing to do with talking about the windows, which is pretty much the sort of essence of this application that's before us tonight. So if there's specifically anything in this report that you've had any involvement with, then yes, okay, I think so. But I'm not sure if there's anyone who has. Councillor Linden.
Economic development last year, I was on the committee. I was also likewise on the working group, and I do believe that this subject came up on the working group, but I will take advice on that.
My understanding would be, if you don't mind me saying, is that we did discuss it, but we haven't been involved in putting this particular report together. If I'm right on that, I'm willing to be corrected.
Chair, for the record, you declare an interest if you consider that it might appear as if you've had predetermined the matter. So but the declaration of whether to declare an interest, the decision about whether you declare an interest is one for you. Only you can know if it's something that might appear, let me use a colloquial term since it's late, dodgy. So we can't really help you. You need to tell us whether there's an issue. So, but if you weren't involved in putting together the application or the scheme, then my advice is unlikely that you have an interest that would prevent you from taking part in the decision, but the decision about that is one only you can make.
Okay, with that in mind, members, do you have any declarations that you need to make? Nope. Okay, thank you, Mike. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is brought before committee in the interest of openness and transparency, because it's the applicant, in this case, is the council itself. Otherwise, you would have perhaps seen this on the weekly list or whatever. Mill Hall, we're all familiar with. It's to the north of the town centre of Rayleigh and within the Rayleigh Conservation Area. If we look at the first photo, please, just to refresh members, the building is of like 1960s era, built in 71, brick-dominated, window proportions as they are. Next photo, please, just to give a flavour before we look at the plans. Thank you. You'll see that the brick here on facing the mount is interacted with the panelling and the window detail. If we can go to the section through, Plan 4, please. The application is in various bits of work. The purpose is to improve the building's energy performance and improve the comfort of the future occupiers. Now, if we can zoom in somehow, if that's possible, to the middle image, that should show members that the roof is being insulated. Sorry, I probably want the next one up. Sorry, Katie, mess you around. The roof is being insulated. If we're lucky, we can see, preferably in the middle image, because it shows the photovoltaics. You'll see that the roof is being thickened with insulation and a new covering, and then on that are rows of solar panels. And in order to prevent the impact upon the conservation area, to screen that impact, the parapet wall that surrounds and boxes in the roof is being raised by 600 mil, about 2 feet. So there's those works on the top. While we're on that image, to my left, your left too, you'll see above the word proposed, there's a wall and stainless steel handrail that's going across the paved area outside the large array of doors that's being repaved, just that bit before the steps, and then a wall and a rail across there to that bit. If we could jump to the elevations 5, please. You'll see that there's in yellow in the top image, which is the front image, the angled porch that goes into the cafe. You'll see that's been replaced with a rectangular type porch detail. And then above that, the roof again is being insulated, and there's some works to provide a balustrade and a screen on that type. The rest of the building, as the chairman said when he said it's all about windows, all the windows are being replaced for double glazed units, aluminium for aluminium, and the panelling, they initially proposed it to be in the cedral planking. Because of objections from the conservation boys at County, they've gone back to an aluminium substitute, and you've got a duty to enhance the conservation area or not make it worse. And the conservation boys said, if you make it aluminium, you're not making it any worse, whereas they felt the alternative material being proposed before would have been a step backwards. It'd be introducing a more modern material, an already modern building. So, in a nutshell, all the windows being replaced, you could argue like for like. You'd have to be really expert to spot the difference. Aluminium from aluminium. You'll see there's no objections raised to the application, none from the specialist advisors on listed buildings and conservation areas, and the recommendation, Chair, is approval for the subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Mike. I know we may get this done by 10 o'clock, but just in case, I'm going to put a resolution for extension of time, and the meeting has now lasted roughly 2.5 hours. I'd like to move a motion without notice in line with committee procedure, Rule 9N, to extend this meeting for a further 30 minutes. Hopefully we won't need that, but I need a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. So now it's ward councillors first. We have ward councillors Cross and Linden in attendance. Now, I need to make it clear, do you want to actually speak as ward councillor? If you do, then you can't vote. Otherwise, you just take part in the general debate. Okay with that? I'm happy to let you speak first in the debate, but that's unfortunately the procedure. Okay, so who wants to speak? Anyone? Councillor Cross.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I welcome these proposals and fully in favour, naturally. I was elected 4 years ago on the basis of saving Mill Hall from demolition to be replaced by a much smaller community hall and some luxury flats. So it pleases me immensely to see that we have plans to make the building fit for purpose, bring it into the 21st century, and hopefully make it energy efficient and a place to be proud of for the whole district. It is the Mill Hall Arts and Events Centre, and I'm pleased to see it being utilised for that purpose currently. And I think these enhancements will make it truly a building to be proud of for the whole district, not just for Rayleigh. But yes, so I'm fully in favour, but I won't be voting. Thank you.
Is there any reason why you won't be voting?
Well, you just told me I couldn't.
No. If you spoke as a ward member, then you can't. But if you speak as a committee member, which you are substituting, you can.
Oh, okay. I was speaking as a committee member then.
I know it seems a bit daft, and I do agree it's a bit daft, but we have to abide by it. Anyway, so thank you for your contribution there. Anyone else want to say anything on it? Councillor Cripps.
Thanks, cheers. It's just a bit of background noise, really, just out of interest. The Friends of Mill Hall, for some reason, seem to think I'm their communication person. They keep asking me and worrying about when this is all going to happen, because they've got events they want to commit to. And they're worried that they'll commit to events and then we'll spring on a shutdown for a couple of weeks while the work's being done or something like that. So they've given me a good idea of what the timeline is now. By mid-February, they'll be going out to tender, which is be a 6-week scenario. So that takes them to the end of March, when they'll be then tackling the bid analysis for the various bids they've got in. So placement of a contract will probably be in 2Q sometime. That's as accurate as I can get at the moment. So that tells us that it won't be before, the earliest it could be will be 3Q, 4Q of this year. That doesn't say that they're going to do it then, but I'm saying that's the earliest. So that's the advice I'm giving them. They need to get cautious when people are trying to book for 3Q and 4Q. But what we should get by the end of March, the tender period, we'll then have a better idea of whether there's a shutdown or not, and which would then interfere with things. But given the roof work, I've specifically asked them to get an execution plan, just in case there's craneage involved, which almost then will stop people being there when they're doing the lifting and so on. So it's just a bit of background stuff now, but that seems to be where it's heading. Cheers.
Thank you for that. I'm sure officers have kept that in mind if you've already spoken to them about it. So I'm sure the officers have kept that in mind if you've already spoken to them about it. Yeah? Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Filman-Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I absolutely fully support this application. As Councillor Cross was, I was elected on a huge Let's Save Mill Hall. We've done that bit, and I'm just delighted that we are finally getting round to actually making it really habitable and really sustainable for our residents to enjoy in the future. So thank you and well done, Rochford District Council.
I'm sure we'll take a pat on the back on that one. Okay. Right. Councillor Sipto.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm fairly safe in saying that I'd like to propose that this is accepted and get it put to the vote. But I would also add that I hope we'll be able to give similar treatment to the Freight House.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak before we go to a vote then? No? Okay. So we have to proceed to move a vote. It is proposed that the committee resolves that planning permission be approved, subject to the following conditions on pages 112 to 114. They are in the report. I'm not going to read them out. Councillor Steptoe has proposed. I will second. And could I proceed to a vote for those in favour, please? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. So, I didn't need to do the extension to time. It's bang on 10 o'clock. So thank you very much for sticking with it tonight, and good night. The meeting is closed at 10 o'clock.